Hello, this is Carol Eversen with Chief Outsiders, and we're really excited to have you join us today for Survive and Thrive, B2B revenue leadership for volatile times. We really appreciate it. And we're going to make sure that we share with you the thoughts that we have about what's happening and what can be done from both, a revenue leadership perspective in terms of approaches and actions that you can take, as well as perhaps taking a look at the structure of the revenue leadership team to see if there might be something that you can do to supplement the team that you have to really tackle some of the challenging issues. Before we go to that, though, we do want to do introductions. And I think it's important to note that the three of us who are on the panel today are all individuals who have worked in a variety of revenue leadership roles, from sales to marketing to product management and product marketing, even into customer success. So with that, what I'd like to do is have the panel introduce ourselves, starting with Karen, and then we'll go from there.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Karen Hayward, and I have spent 20 years of my career at Xerox Canada, going back and forth between all the functions that Carol mentioned. After that career, I moved to Silicon Valley, where I worked for several mid-market companies in either a combo role of sales and marketing or in a CMO role. So I'm delighted to be here to share some thoughts with you today.
And Vince?
Hi, everybody. I'm also very excited to join you today. Vince Margiotta. I have over 30 years of B2B experience, managed P&Ls from 10 million to multi-billion. My C-level responsibilities have included sales and marketing, product management, and operations. And every role I've had has either directly led sales or I've been joined at the hip with sales to help drive growth.
Thanks. And I'm Carol Eversen. I also have that breadth of experience. I started my career in sales, then moved into marketing and included pretty much every type of marketing role you can have. I also ran two P&Ls. Both of them were in the $200 to $300 million range. Was a software product manager, worked at a tech pub startup. So just a variety of experiences from small to large, pre-revenue to billion plus companies, and across all of the different functional disciplines. So hopefully our conversation today will give you the benefit of those experiences, and also, we'll be excited to share some thoughts about the current times. Before we do go into what we should do about it, we wanted to spend just a moment talking about the situation at hand, and hopefully all is working and we are able to see. There we go. Great. So currently, one of the things we've been talking about is what's happening in terms of deal making and decisions. Market volatility is driving what we've termed weightflation, which this list is probably something many of you have seen. And we just wanted to put it up and acknowledge that there are delays in decisions. People are taking shortcuts. They're treading water rather than solving problems. They're doing things to reduce costs. And the other thing that's happening when you're trying to sell to clients and prospects is the prospects, for the most part, their mindset is shifting from I'm playing not to lose versus playing to win. And all of this is exacerbated for those of you that are PE backed, because the hold times have gone up. And when hold times go up, that applies pressure to drive organic growth in a very significant way, and not necessarily with the increased resources that you might need to drive additional organic growth. So we recognize this is one of the key situations that's happening. But what's interesting is it's building on top of it another trend that's been happening for the past several years. If you look at this chart right to left, I think it tells an interesting story. On the right-hand side, what you see is a trend that's been happening for several years, but it's been heightened in the past years and is on steroids with AI. And that is that buyers are using digital media to learn more about the needs that they have and the solutions they want, and doing online research, oftentimes before your sales folks even know there's an opportunity or a need. So they're doing a lot more of the work than they've done in the past, in an offline mode or in an online mode, but not in a conversational mode with sales. If you go to the middle quote, the 70%, there's a recent McKinsey study, and that study said that 70% of B2B buyers have said they would be willing to spend up to $500,000 on an online purchase, which again is problematic because they might make a purchase before your sales folks even know something's happening. So when we look at this, if you move more to the left, what we see is that the roles have shifted a bit in the marketplace in that in the past, sales really was identifying a lot of these opportunities. Marketing was working on awareness, working on interest. Now you've got more of a combined effort in terms of marketing and sales. And even though it delineates marketing and sales, I would argue that on that right side of the triangle, the inverse triangle, it's a teamwork. It's a teamwork between sales and marketing at every stage in the process, much more so today than it has been in the past if you want to drive the level of growth that you're looking to grow. So this shift, though, is a second factor that's really key. And let me just stop sharing for a sec. So really what we wanted to do is with that backdrop, move forward. We're going to go through a series of questions and talk about what do you do about all of that. We would love to have you guys submit some questions. So feel free, there is a Q&A section at the bottom. Feel free to enter them there and we'll either answer them as we go or at the end of the call. And we will have a Q&A session at the end. So hopefully with that established as like the foundation, we're going to talk about, so what do we do about this? What I'd like to do first, though, is talk about, we've used the phrase revenue leadership multiple times here. What I'd like to do is just cover what that means. So Vince, maybe if you could talk us through what revenue leadership means to you.
Sure. Thanks. I hear revenue leadership and I think revenue growth. So when I led a large product P&L at a Fortune 500 company, we focused on the customer experience using an acronym called LBGUPS. So that stands for Learn, Buy, Get, Use, Pay, Support. And that's from a customer's buying journey perspective. And so I had challenged our product managers to be the CEO of their products and to work every stage of that LBGUPS process to maximize revenue opportunity while optimizing the customer experience. So just like a CEO would do for the entire company, a revenue leader should be thinking opportunistically about how to grow revenue cross-functionally, not just in sales.
Okay, great. Karen, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think Vince just gave the textbook answer of what it really should be. However, I would say that most of the people in the market, certainly the mid-market, would really say, you know what, it's sales and marketing. And, that go-to-market plan with a heavy emphasis on those two areas. And again, like Vince says, I think it's all about growth strategy. Like, how do we think about profitably growing this business? And the last thing I would add is sales and marketing really has to share the funnel. You just showed the inverted triangle. They have to share that entire funnel from start to finish. And when I think of a chief revenue officer or revenue leadership, that's what I think of, that full funnel execution.
Thanks. I agree. In fact, as I think of an example, when I think about it, I think it's proactive. It is focused on the customer. It's really paying attention to the industry and the changes in the industry. And an example that I have is when I was the general manager, when I was put into the role of general manager of AT&T Teleconference, we had a $125 million product. It was broken. People were upset. Our chairman threw a chair across the room when the conference call broke. And so they brought someone in that knew nothing about it. My job was fix it or kill it. And so I did a little bit of work and found out really quickly we had 3 different segments with 3 different sets of needs, and we had one platform. So it was a pretty easy solution that just required a different way of thinking. And it was bring in 3 separate platforms. Not always easy to do at AT&T at the time, but we did. And we took the revenue from 125 million to turn 50 million in 3.5 years. And all it took was paying attention to the market segment. So to me, that's when I think of revenue leadership, it's activity like that. So let's go on to the next question. What should CEOs be asking of their revenue leadership teams when they're facing all the challenges we were just talking about? Karen, could you maybe comment on that?
So look, I think you always have to start with the voice of the customer. So, what intimate knowledge do you have about how your customer's feeling, thinking, reacting to the product or service? The second piece is, okay, so therefore, what's our plan? How are we going to capitalize on that? And when I speak to Vistage groups, I always say every one of your competitors is in their Vistage group trying to figure out how to beat you. So we really have to pay attention to competitors. And I guess thirdly, it's keep your focus on outcomes along the full funnel and your focus also on in-process measures, because if your in-process measures go wacky, your outcomes are never going to get there in the timeline you expect. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Vince, how about you? Thoughts?
Very, very similar to Karen. So two questions come to mind. It's like, what are the emerging trends that we're seeing as a revenue leader? What are we seeing? And then how do we adjust our strategies to capitalize on those or to defend if the situation calls for it? And then the second, I guess, question would be, how are we incorporating, both customer as well as frontline employee feedback into our product development and our sales approach? Sometimes the frontline, our frontline teammates, they have so much information, they just assume upper management knows it, right? But they're closer to the customer, they're closer to competitors, they're closer to the business problems. We should be tapping into that and leveraging it.
That is so true. So here's a question. If let's assume you have a really high performing leadership team, revenue leadership team, and I'm going to define that as strong heads of all the different functions and a collaborative team. So it's people that actually work together very effectively. But now they're faced with all these challenges. What can a CEO do to really help them pivot and adjust to the market that we're dealing with now and to those underlying trends that we were just talking about? Karen, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, at the end of the day, I think mid-market CEOs get pushed to compromise on talent. Okay, and assuming you get the voice of the customer and you have a strategy and a plan, you still need to have great execution. So I think getting the right sales leadership, you're always going to need sales leadership, right? You're always going to have a sales force or BDRs or whatever, and they're always going to need leadership. However, when you compromise the role of the sales leader with, having to lead marketing underneath them, I think you make a massive error in having sales rather drive marketing instead of sales being the outcome of a great marketing plan. So I think this is where we've seen a lot of cases that are very successful, where you can get a fractional marketing executive who can help build the plan, get the organization into like a repeatable engine that can scale, and then really focus on that deep sales experience to drive the execution of the revenue.
Okay, that sounds great. And in essence, I guess you're saying whatever one needs to do, having the right talent for the different disciplines is what's key.
Otherwise, you compromise. I've been at Chief Outsiders for 12 years. 12 years ago, you could have a marketing person that was a generalist. Today, you really compromise when you have a generalist. Marketing has become very, very technical and much more complicated, and you have much more at stake because they own most of the buyer's journey. So getting the right talent at the right point with the right expertise is a game changer.
Okay, that makes sense. So then sometimes though, maybe a revenue leadership team is not necessarily high performing. Maybe you don't have the right talent in place, or there's a situation that's just not working. Do you have an example of a scenario like that where you've seen that perhaps something needs to change?
Uh, yeah, so I would say when industry trends are so disruptive that the current revenue leader can't adjust quickly enough to stay on track for the required growth, that's an issue. I've seen it in the cable industry, when all the cord cutting caused the people who had great experience historically, all of a sudden now it was a different model, and so changes needed to occur. But before it's too late, a good revenue leader needs to be self-aware and needs to recognize that they either need to hire to their weakness or they need to capitalize on a strength in order to achieve growth. And typically it's double-digit growth. And if you can't figure out how to do it, you better find some help, get the talent you need in order to assist you in the team.
And I'm thinking of a situation where I had a client that was a knowledge-based SaaS company, and the situation they had is they had a good marketing team that had helped them build their initial brand and really gotten them to a certain stage. But as they pivoted into high growth, that team wasn't aligned with sales. So there was a misalignment, and they didn't look at ROI. They focused just on leads, and once the leads were handed over, like their part of the job was done, and that didn't work. And so there became a huge mistrust gap between the marketing team and the leadership team, and some changes were made. So to me, that's an example as well of a type of situation where everything's just not clicking and something needs to give. So the question really becomes, in these situations, what do you do? Like, what as the CEO, you've got this situation, what do you do? I will share one, and then ask for some other examples. When I first went to work at LexisNexis, the CEO of my business unit was a former NFL linebacker. So he was like 6'8". He was on the Oakland Raiders here, they won the Super Bowl, but he was very clear to articulate that he was a bench warmer and not a starter, or he wouldn't have been a CEO of a business unit at LexisNexis. But I walked in my first day. My first meeting was with me and the head of sales going to meet with the CEO. And we walked in. The first thing I noticed is I'm 5'1", and he was sitting and I was standing and I was looking at him eye to eye. So it was a little on the intimidating side. And he's very, like very talkative with his arms, and he spreads his arms out and they were the length of the conference room table. So and the head of sales was like 6'3". So I'm sitting in this situation, and he just starts. The meeting was about 30 seconds, and he just looked at us and goes, "You," and he pointed to me. He said, "I don't ever want to hear you say that he's not working on your leads." And you, he pointed to the head of sales. He goes, "I don't ever want to hear you say she's giving you bad leads. You two own revenue leadership, your team, go away. Do not come back single-handedly. If you come back to the team. That's it. And leave." So the two of us walked out of the room. I looked up and he looked down, and we were like, okay, we're going to be best friends. And that's just the way it's going to be. We don't have a choice. And we are still very good friends 15 years later. So to me, the starting point for what can a CEO do is set an expectation, stick to that expectation. Don't get dragged into the drama. Force the two, three, or four, however many functions you have that are revenue, to work it out. There are examples, though. I'll go ahead, Karen.
I would just add another point to that. I think that's a really smart CEO. I mean, marketing has to be accountable for revenue. And I can't tell you how many times marketing is just like this little underfunction of sales, and they don't share that accountability for the outcomes. In-process measures are great. I want to add a second point. I think we often see, certainly at Chief Outsiders with our client base, underperforming sales teams. And the CEO is just perplexed, like, why? We thought we hired them. We thought we would figure it out. And for the last several years, we've used a tool called Objective Management Group. And what it does, and this is what I tell every CEO, assess your team, figure out where your blind spots are, figure out what exact coaching in the buyer's journey. You look at how small the opportunity is. If I go back to your inverted chart, Carol, you look at how small that opportunity is for the sales force to actually execute their support of that part of the buyer's journey, you have to have really good sales talent today to win. And OMG provides sales assessments, and they have been proven. There is just a study out that 72% of the candidates that they recommend who are hired rank in the top half of the sales force within 12 months. Secondly, 100% of the candidates not recommended by OMG who are still hired are in the bottom half of their sales teams. So this is something that has super high correlation to success. And also 75% of the candidates that they don't recommend but are still hired fail within 6 months. So here we have a tool, Vince, we all use it, that can help assess your sales force with a proven, tried and true process that has been developed and built and been collecting statistics for like 20 years.
Wow, that is so true. Karen, on another note,
Yeah.
and somewhat related to our earlier conversation, one of the things that grew up in the corporate world, in the large enterprise world, was this title called Chief Revenue Officer. Some people call it Chief Commercial Officer, Chief Growth Officer. And in essence, the thought process, especially in large corporations, was to add this CRO function. What's interesting is in that environment, it wasn't in place of those functional roles, those functional chief revenue officer or chief sales, chief marketing, chief customer success, head of product, all reported to the chief revenue officer. As we go down market, it's obviously not reasonable for people to have multiple C levels in an SMB. So my question to you is, how do you think about the CRO title and its applicability in the lower end of the market?
Okay, so I'm probably going to be very controversial here. You hit a chord. Because in a mid-market company, I've been both. And so I have seen firsthand the compromise you make. When you are running sales and marketing, you know what you're doing? You're running sales, because we have 100 or 200 or 300 families that need to eat at the end of every month. So that is a very short-term focus. We have to drive on a weekly basis. We've got to be driving the activities. We've got to be forecasting on a monthly basis, and we got to hit that monthly number. When you think about marketing, good marketing is really looking outside the window. We have to get more leads in. We have to figure out, do we need a price increase? All of the marketing activities tend, not always, but tend to have a longer time purview. So when you try and mix the yin and the yang of it, you always, the VP of sales and marketing is always driven to the customer crisis of the day that they need to support their salespeople on. The fact they got to review proposals, the fact they have to be out talking to clients all the time. That makes it really hard to sort of step back and say, geez, what are the levers I need to be pulling to take my revenue engine to the next level? So I am really not a fan.
Okay. I understand that and agree. Vince, there are times though when perhaps a CRO makes sense at the higher end of mid-market potentially. Can you share your thoughts about that?
Sure. And again, I've been with several Fortune 50 companies where they had these exact titles. And so when organizations start to get really complex with matrix management, dotted line reporting relationships, like I've had companies where I've had two bosses, new acquisitions or major reorganizations, a CRO should have the executive presence and the credibility inside the company to be able to advocate cross-functionally for key customers and important sales and marketing initiatives. Now you have the luxury of having larger teams, and you have probably people with even more experience than you as a CRO that can handle, those day-to-day, fire drills that Karen had mentioned. But sometimes you just got to have somebody that can go remove the roadblocks for the team organizationally, but also can engage strategically and help with marketing and sales as needed. but really just clear the roadblocks for your team so your team can be successful.
So you're thinking about really at the top end of the mid-market, right? For the
Yes,
part,
I've seen it. I've seen it, in other places, and a lot of times it's not necessarily an organizational issue. And you make those choices, and that's fine if you have reasons to do that. But where I've seen that title used a lot is when these organizations are so complex. I used to call it this matrix management thing. We have mutually assured destruction because you have the common goals, but you have no organizational alignment. So you have to just force it uh, and make it happen because it's just too hard to make these huge division changes when the companies are really large. And so this is it's basically a band-aid.
okay. So, and for that reason, I think sometimes CEOs will hire a chief revenue officer in these larger companies. What I'm going to pull up now is just a really quick slide with some recommended experiences that if you are in a position where you are planning to hire a CRO to tackle some of these challenges, these are the experiences that I would recommend that you have that individual possess. And it's actually been proven in a variety of studies that these are the key experiences that will drive chief revenue officer success. First and foremost, sales leadership experience, of course, and owning commitments and leading a team to achieve the goals. Next up, though, is marketing leadership. And it's interesting. I had someone once say to me, well, I've managed marketing. And I was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah. I had someone that did my events and my brochures. And I was like, okay, that's not really managing marketing. That's managing the sales enablement piece of marketing and is helpful, but is not the same as managing things like segmentation, the development of the value prop, setting a go-to-market strategy, and looking at the conversion funnel from the very top all the way to the bottom. So that's a very, very, very different skill set than the person that does whatever the sales leader asks them to do from a marketing perspective. Next up is customer success and customer experience leadership. Because as companies are shifting from just hunters and hunting for new logos to trying to get more revenue from current customers, especially during periods of volatility, you need someone that understands that full customer experience and can think about here's an opportunity for us, or here's a step in the process that's really going to increase retention rate or increase cross sell. That's really key. And if you haven't had that experience, you're not as likely to think beyond the close of the sale. Product ownership's helpful. Not a lot of folks have that experience, but if you have folks that also have had product ownership, they learn how to think about how to connect the dots from hearing what sales and the clients are saying they need to understanding what the capabilities are. Because the last thing you need in a period of volatility is someone selling a capability that doesn't even exist or pushing for something that realistically is going to take 2 years to build, and you're not equipped to really go to market, and yet you're starting to put a key near-term strategy around it. So that product ownership is helpful. And then finally, what ties it all together is P&L ownership. So I don't know if you guys have any comments you wanted to add, Karen or Vince, on that, but these are this is what we've found in all of the research that we've done. And
I
And that's
agree.
really hard to get in a
Yeah.
mid-market type level person, right? Which really speaks to if you could find all those capabilities in one individual, you have a unicorn.
yep. Okay. So next up, given the everything that's happening, the volatility, the shifts in the inverted buying funnel, Karen, as you think about scrappy, lower end mid-market companies that just really want to move and get over this hump that we've all been going through with the challenges with the market during this period of market volatility, what are the top two things you might give the CEO that's thinking about that?
Okay, so I think at this point you need to be closer to your customers than you've ever been. You need to be inside their heads. And I think one of the best ways to do that is hire a firm, someone like Chief Outsiders or someone else that can go in and interview your clients who've decided to purchase with you and your clients who have not decided to purchase with you. So we call that a win-loss analysis. You need to understand where are the friction points in your process. So for example, are they afraid because they've never done this and they think it's a massive commitment? Maybe you can deal with that by providing a money-back guarantee, right? There was a big study done by McKinsey that said 75% of B2B buyers will look for another vendor if there's no money-back guarantee in the sales process. It's stunning, right? So you've really got to get closer to your customer. So that's one thing. And you don't have to make that a massive project. It can be done in 30 days and get to really good outcomes about how to improve your entire customer journey, your marketing, all the way through to your sales execution. So that's one. The second thing I would say is if you're on a really low budget, and I'm always like, if it's free, it's for me. I think the best thing to do is a digital marketing assessment that includes your competitors. So if you do that with our company, it's a $10,000 investment. Gets done in 30 days, and it will give you all of your competitors' positioning, all of the dynamics of how are they getting their web traffic? How are you competing with them? Every digital metric that you want to know about your performance in relation to your competitors, and therefore, what should you do in a prioritized set of activities to up your game, and what should those investments look like? Not doing something like that, just you don't get in the game. And we saw, to your earlier charts, Carol, everybody is doing their digital homework. And so being able to understand how you are executing in light of your competitors can be really enlightening.
Yeah, no, that's great. Vince, if you look at the a larger mid-market and enterprise end of the spectrum, what do you see as the most critical advice for the CEOs in those scenarios?
I love this question, Carol. It reminds me of City Slickers when Jack Palance is asking Billy Crystal, what's the secret of life? And he said it's like one thing, right? And so I'm a career-long evangelist for helping salespeople be successful. And after decades of trying, the best tool I've ever used to do that is the sales velocity model. And it's really for any size company. And maybe you can put that up on a screen, Carol, for me. It's really for any size company. And probably more importantly, it's for any sales rep, not just reps that are struggling, but reps that are achieving, maybe even overachieving, but really are not clear on what they need to do to get to the next level. And so I know this looks complicated and it's very busy, but in summary, it's a what if sales performance model for reps and their coaches to use to drive to quota, and more importantly, even beyond quota. And so the top third of this model are for inputs around rep skill level, how they drive opportunities from prospecting to proposal and then to close. So it captures the skill levels. It also captures the size of an average sale and the source of sale. Where are your leads coming from? So now you start to understand that a lead that comes from a cold call may go through the funnel at a different pace and at a different success rate than a referral from a trusted, other customer or even a family member. And so this model gets at that in a fairly easy way. And so based on the top third, based on those actual or desired inputs, the bottom 2/3 of the model actually calculates the required sort of day in the life of sales activity. So what does the sales rep's day look like, given their skill level, given their size of sale that they're going after, so their strategy, and given how they're working all those lead sources in different channels. And so the takeaway here is as a rep really starts to improve their sales skills and understands what they're working on and with their coach, or they improve their size of the sale, the required daily activity required to drive to quota and to overachieve quota also adjusts, right? It's like a rate and volume kind of thing. And so now the rep understands, and can actually model and focus on the levers that drive both their income as well as the quality of their daily work life. So I know this is complicated, but I'm really passionate about this. I've seen it work for great reps that want to be greater and make it to President's Club. And I've seen it, take reps that are in the bottom half and get them to performing and now really understanding, and their coaches to understand what should we focus on. Because I think that's a big problem, out there right now is CEOs want to help, but it's not clear because this kind of information is not obvious and not being tracked very well. So here is a way to really get underneath and at the rep level, and then therefore at the team level, and then at the company level, this can actually help a sales rep. And I'll just say, I'm so passionate about this. Anybody that wants to spend an hour with me kind of going through this and talking about it and trying to understand and maybe put it to use, I'm happy. Just, email me or find me on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm happy to spend an hour.
It's almost like every rep in the company gets an individual recipe for success.
Yes, and it's what's really interesting about this is, first of all, it's like, rep, go prove to me that you can convert an initial appointment into a proposal. Go do 10, go do 100, whatever it is. When I did this, we made reps do 100 phone calls, and then we made them do 100 emails. Then we had fewer appointments, obviously, but we made them go prove their skill level. And then but they didn't understand their numbers well enough to be able to model it. But once we now had a baseline, we could coach to it. The sales managers had a plan to be able to coach their reps to success. And if this is a daily thing, this is like, okay, this is what you got to go do every single day. Here's what you got to do for the month in order to hit your targets. And now we can coach to it on a daily basis. So it really works. I'm happy to share it with anybody that's more interested.
That.
Yeah, that is awesome. I have a question for you about this, Vince. If like now we're experiencing the weightflation stage. If you're tracking this at a corporate level, you're going to see your sales velocity shifting probably faster than if you just sort of figure it out downstream when the sales volumes start dropping. Would you agree that this is also a way for a company, I may be wrong, but would you agree this is a way for a company to also identify when they're running into a problem and maybe get a little more proactive at it a bit faster?
Yes, because what happens, so companies that are struggling with sales, for example, they'll say, all right, here's my good reps. Let's just let them keep running, right? Let's leave them alone. Let's go focus all of our time on the reps that are struggling. Well, a lot of times the reps that are struggling have lower commitment, lower skill level, lower activity. And so you're spending all your time trying to force the lowest performers to an acceptable level. What this does, this gets everybody in the game. It's like good reps, revenue is flat. We need to grow. So what is your plan to go from 100% on average to 110 or 110 to 150? Here's what we can do. And now with this at an individual rep level or team level, you could put incentives in place to say, go do this for this team because we understand the numbers, and it makes sense. There's so many things you can do when you have this kind of data to help. But Carol, you're absolutely right. What I love about this is that a CEO or a senior executive could actually sit in a one-on-one in a very constructive conversation, put this model, up on the wall or whatever, and have a conversation about it. How can a CEO help drive more leads from the referral source of sale? Or how can we get marketing to drive more marketing qualified leads? Because guess what? Those are closing much better than the cold calling. Why are we spending so much time cold calling when our good reps as well as our lower reps are spending so much time, but we're just not getting a good ROI from that? It's a very good conversation. It's very constructive, and so it's about the numbers and about the activity. It's not about the person.
It takes me back to the earlier comment I made What do CEOs need? They need to know the in-process measures
Yep.
and the results measures. And Vince, you just beautifully articulated all of the in-process measures for a sales team. How do we know we're going to be successful? It's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
great.
thanks.
That's really good. And I'll just add from my perspective across all sizes of organizations, when we think about like what's the one or two pieces of advice, do an honest assessment of the team. Take a serious look at them. Are they really in a position to give you great guidance on tariffs, on, everything that's happening with AI, on, and how that impacts your business, and on the weightflation that's coming from everything that's going on in the marketplace. So number one, honest assessment, and get some help if needed. And there are lots of places to go for help. You can get a coach or an advisor. You can have fractional or interim leadership come support you. You can have an assessment. Karen talked about some assessments that might help give you guidance and input. There are a variety of ways that you can do it. You might decide you need to hire someone different for a role. Those are all options available, but there are lots of avenues for help that are out there. We're certainly happy to help, but there are lots of avenues that are out there for help. And I think with that, I have one more thing I'd like to share quickly, and then we'll head into questions. There was a post done by Mark Taylor, who some of you may know. He's my Vistage chair, and he is a master chair in New York City. He just did a post. He actually is a positive intelligence instructor, and he really is highly effective at this. He's won a number of the recent awards within Vistage. And I think this is about broad leadership, and this was pointed towards CEOs, but I would say that this is the same thinking we should be doing for revenue leadership, which is right there in the key part of it. It's right now your biggest competitor isn't another company, it's your own mindset. His perspective, and by the way, there's a really well done LinkedIn post that was 2 days ago that I would encourage all of you to go find. But the key points from it were the last 6 months have been exhausting. Everybody's excited one week, afraid the next, excited the week after that, thinking things are getting better, then another hiccup, and it's just a roller coaster. And his quote, "I see brilliant CEOs pull back, positioning growth investments, freezing strategic hires, switching from innovation mode to survival mode, and then later scrambling to catch up." He talked about this whiplash as stealing your competitive advantage, especially if there are competitors that are proactively tackling some of these. And his feeling was that it's really about the cost of reactive leadership. His perspective was that, in positive intelligence, you have saboteurs and sages. The saboteur looks at the whole situation and says, "This is really awful." And the sage says, "Oh, what can I do with this? What am I learning? Where is it taking me? How can I go forward?" So his point of view is, to every CEO, this is your leadership moment, and you decide how you want to handle it. I think this is exactly the type of approach that we take, whether it's a revenue challenge or other business challenges. And just wanted to share that because I thought that was a really insightful post and would encourage you to track it down. So with that, if we have questions, we have a little bit of time for questions. I haven't looked in the Q&A yet. Do we have anything in the Q&A? Nope. And we're using a new process. Oh, here's one. So what do you think about AI and its impacts to revenue leaders? Rather than typing an answer, Vince, you're probably in the best position to answer that one, right?
Sure. I would say that there's so much out there on AI. There's so many different companies, so many things going, but really, probably at this stage, the entire customer buying journey is an opportunity. And the learn, buy, get, use, pay, support sort of product view of process is also an opportunity. So I would say determine how we can use AI to again maximize revenue across those processes and across that journey while we're optimizing the customer experience. So it's about experimenting and taking some calculated risks and to get ahead or catch up to the competition and drive better results.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question from Chris Brown. He asked if we could get a copy of the sales velocity model slide. It resonated with him. Absolutely. I believe we're sending all of the slides out, so you'll have access to all of them, Chris. And if for any reason someone doesn't get them, please reach out to me, 𝐓𝐸versen@chiefalzheimer's.com, and I'll make sure you get them. Next up, what is the biggest mistake a CEO can make when trying to figure out how to think about revenue leadership looking ahead? Karen, do you want to take that one?
So this is funny. I see this a lot in the marketplace. It is thinking about things like from your company perspective and then going out to market. So I call it factory out versus customer in, and really not taking the time to get the customer intimacy and understanding where is the prospect or the potential customer at this point in time. And the example of that would be what I talked about earlier. Get the voice of the customer, get your net promoter scores from your clients, find out how you're doing against your competitors. Are they changing? Do a competitive analysis. Find out how you're performing digitally in the marketplace. Do your win-loss analysis. Why are you winning? Why are you losing? Incorporate the voice of the customer into the business and focus less on your selling process and more on serving the customer's buying journey.
So true. That is so true. I want to add one other thing to that in terms of a major mistake I've seen is perhaps not thinking through the implications of leadership. I've seen a scenario, and I had a particular situation where a PE company reached out to us because one of their portfolio companies had promoted the head of sales to become their chief revenue officer. And the chief revenue officer didn't know what to do when it came to marketing or customer success and needed help. And so we did. We stepped in and we did an engagement, and we basically trained the CRO on how to be a CRO, and baby steps. But we did some of the work for them, and then we helped them. And while to me, that's not the ideal situation. It encompasses two things. One is do that honest assessment. Maybe that head of sales isn't the right person. If you're going to do a CRO, maybe that's not the right person. Maybe it is, but make sure that person has the right skill set. And if you do have a hole that you need to fill, even if you decide I'm going to do it this way, reach out to somebody, us, anybody that's a great candidate. Obviously, I think we can do a great job for you, but reach out and get some help, and don't let your other functions suffer because the staffing process wasn't necessarily the right one. So let me see, are there any other questions? I think that might be it at this stage. And just Chris saying, thank you. You're very welcome, Chris. So, okay, I think other than that, we are good to go. So thank you very much for your time. We've enjoyed it. And good luck as things proceed over. Let's hope that this volatility kind of settles itself down a little bit. So thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.